On Monday, Trump posted on social media, "If they spit, we will hit. And I promise you, they will be hit harder than they have ever been hit before. Such disrespect will not be tolerated." All this comes after Trump disrupted LA communities by escalating ICE raids that sparked protests from residents. And these protests then gave Trump the reason he's been waiting for, to federalize the National Guard and send them to LA, even against the governor's wishes, who is now suing Trump for this action. And Trump has even begun to prepare the Marines to come to LA. But the mayor and the governor say Trump's increased police force is unnecessary and is making the problem worse. Critics quickly point out that Trump has no problem pardoning roughly 300 people who assaulted police officers during the January 6th riots, many of whom were caught on surveillance cameras, where 140 police officers were injured in the riot. But then Trump takes a completely opposite stance when the police force is under his control. The next day, California's governor, Gavin Newsom, addressed the nation saying that Trump's abuse of power inflamed a combustible situation by sending the National Guard and Marines to LA. In his speech, he said, "This all started because Trump did not focus on targeting illegal immigrants with serious criminal records and final deportation orders, a strategy that both parties support, but instead his undercover police force is indiscriminately rounding up people regardless of their roots or risk and undermining their due process rights." And despite protests breaking out, Newsom said that California authorities had it under control. However, he goes on to say that Trump chose this moment for escalation, and he chose to use more force as an act of theater to further his own agenda and to seize more power and control, which is a sign of weakness masquerading as strength. He encourages citizens around the country to keep speaking out peacefully and to hold those in power accountable to resist Trump's authoritarian regime, because our Constitution, our balance of power, is under assault before our very eyes. Then on Wednesday, Karoline Leavitt gave another press briefing where she called the anti-ICE protests shameful, claimed that inflation is under control, and that the big, beautiful bill will have our economy booming like it's never happened before. But there were two moments that really stood out during the briefing. One was when a reporter wanted clarification about who is paying the paid insurrectionists that the president claimed were behind the LA protests. Since Karoline didn't have any real evidence to the president's claim, she just speculated about the protesters having what she says is professional riot gear, and therefore must be paid by someone. So once again, she's fanning speculation as fuel for conspiracy theories, which is a typical tactic of Trump's politics, rather than digging into the evidence for his claims or into the effectiveness of his policies. And the second moment was this.
The president absolutely supports peaceful protests. He supports the First Amendment. He supports the right of Americans to make their voices heard. He does not support violence of any kind. He does not support assaulting law enforcement officers who are simply trying to do their job. It's very clear for the president what he supports and what he does not. Unfortunately for Democrats, that line has not been made clear, and they've allowed this unrest and this violence to continue, and the president has had to step in.
So if there were peaceful protests on Saturday for the militant parade, President Trump would allow that?
Of course the president supports peaceful protests. What a stupid question. Raquel.
And we're going to be celebrating big on Saturday. We're going to have a lot of, and if there's any protester wants to come out, they will be met with very big force. By the way, for those people that want to protest, they're going to be met with very big force. And I haven't even heard about a protest, but you know, this is people that hate our country, but they will be met with very heavy force. Thank you very much, everybody.
The next day, a federal judge ruled that Trump's use of the National Guard in LA was illegal. But a few hours later, an appeals court temporarily blocked the ruling. First, a U.S. district court ruled that the National Guard deployment was illegal because it violated both the 10th Amendment and exceeded Trump's statutory authority. In the district court's ruling, Judge Breyer said, "We're talking about the president exercising his authority, and the president is of course limited in that authority. That's the difference between a constitutional government and King George." Then the Trump administration quickly appealed, and the 9th U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals temporarily blocked the district court's ruling and said it would hold a hearing on Tuesday, June 17th. So once again, Trump is testing the bounds of his authority, and once again he has another case that could be heading to the Supreme Court. Then on Friday, a federal judge further blocks Trump's executive order to overhaul elections in the US. On March 25th, Trump signed the executive order that would give more power to the federal government for election oversight and could deny married women the right to vote. For more details on this, you can see my March 25th video or watch my Week 10 recap on YouTube. But then in April, a different judge blocked some of this executive order. And then today, Judge Denise Casper blocked more. In her ruling, she said, "The Constitution does not grant the president any specific powers over elections, and that the president's executive order does more to disenfranchise voters and create chaos and confusion rather than protect election integrity. Most likely, the Trump administration will appeal this decision." Next day was a day of political opposition that started with a Republican man targeting 2 Democratic politicians in Minnesota, killing one and her husband. Then, as the rest of the day unfolded, more than 5 million people in over 2,100 cities across the country took part in the No Kings protests to stand against Trump and his military parade on the same day. With few exceptions, these protests remained peaceful throughout the day. So I'll just leave you with some photos of the protests around the country. Finally, on Sunday, in an ABC interview with Rachel Scott, Trump said that the US is not involved in Israel's strikes on Iran, but it's possible we could get involved in the near future. Iran's foreign minister said that Israel's attack on his country could not have happened without the agreement and support of the US, and insisted that Iranian officials do not believe the US's claim that they had no involvement. Despite the stalled talks with Iran, Trump is optimistic that Israel's strikes on the country will eventually bring them to the negotiating table.